One of the things that they teach you in medicine, at least in combat, trauma, combat medicine, is cooler heads prevail.
He served in the U.S. Navy, earned combat medical designations with the Marine Corps, which means he literally learned to keep people alive under fire. Then he came home, got into real estate, won National Rookie of the Year at Sperry Van Ness, walked away from brokerage, found his own capital group, and built Lucrum into a private lending platform doing 250% year over year with 100% distribution pay history to investors.
I went from one environment that was life or death, high stress with a lot of variables that were out of my control, to an environment which was distressed real estate in the real estate market in 2008, 2009. And the biggest downside was potentially a loss of money. We're not losing life or limb.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Process Over Pressure, the show where we skip the polished highlight reel and go straight to the story. I'm Chad Paris, founder of Stonefly Consulting Group, fly fisherman, and a guy who spent 15 plus years fixing other people's problems before I got brave enough to fix my own. Today's guest is exactly the kind of person this show was built for. He served in the U.S. Navy, earned combat medical designations with the Marine Corps, which means he literally learned to keep people alive under fire. Then he came home, got into real estate, won National Rookie of the Year at Sperry Van Ness, walked away from brokerage, found his own capital group, and built Lucrum into a private lending platform doing 250% year over year with 100% distribution pay history to investors. Oh, and by the way, his COO was on Shark Tank and landed $1 million from Mark Cuban. So there's that also. But here's what I'm really after today. Not the resume. I want to know what a combat medic sees when he looks at a broken real estate deal. And I want to know what makes a guy put his own money in first before even asking one investor to put $1 in. And I want to know what it takes or cost him to build something real. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Thomas McPherson. Welcome to Process Over Pressure.
Thanks, Chad. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to diving into all those wonderful questions you put forward.
Great. When we originally met, I had an opportunity to kind of, get to know you. And what was your first thought when you met? Like, okay, this guy's about to, what is he after? What does he want? Love to know your first impression. I always think that's fun.
Yeah, my first impression is that we're all different. We all see the world differently, but, you have a very unique view, approaching everything from like a design or systems approach. I kind of, with my medical background, trauma background, I tend to approach things from a what can go wrong and how can I fix it? Whereas, I think my first impression with you was, how can I systematize this? How can I make it more efficient, reduce the error rate, and, allow folks to scale faster?
Yeah. Yeah. It's an interesting, you say that in two different mindsets, you being more of, you triage, right? Like where's it broken? Let's get it fixed. Me coming from the world I've been in, you're right. It's more of like, let's assess, let's process. How do we get there? So I think this is going to be fun, and both of our minds probably think and look at business totally different, which is kind of cool because I think we'll have some good conversation, to go back and forth. So yeah, I'm excited about the conversation. I think, what's hopeful is people need to hear the story. And I think that you have an amazing story. So I'm really excited to kind of diving in. So Thomas, kind of reaching that, going back to your beginning here, you trained as as a combat medic in the Navy, which in itself is its own unique challenges and certainly seen a lot of stuff. You kind of basically learn to keep people alive under pressure. So walk me through kind of what that was like. And then now you being in business, the question I guess is people always ask, do you still use a lot of those tactics into your business today? And what was the learning experience from that that's kind of brought it into where we are today or where you are today?
Yeah. Yeah, well, September 11th, a little personal background. September 11th happened when I was a senior in high school. I can barely imagine it's almost 25 years ago now,
It's
which
crazy.
is a long time. But very formative for guys like you and me and older folks of that generation. And so, I felt a call to serve our nation and protect, what I loved. And I wanted to do so in a way that I thought skills were transferable to the kind of post military career. So I decided to pursue medicine. And one of the things that they teach you in medicine, at least in combat, trauma, combat medicine, is cooler heads prevail. When you let your stress and the adrenaline get the best of you, your cognitive resources, diminishes significantly. It really kind of goes down. And the same is true in the business world. Cooler heads prevail. Sometimes people are trying to stir you up emotionally to get you to make mistakes. Sometimes your competition is just beating you, or maybe you made an own goal and you're beating yourself. And I think that is like the single biggest takeaway that I had from the military was remain calm, keep all of your cognitive abilities available to you. And with that, you will be able to make the best decision to either A, avoid the worst possible outcome, or B, if you're in a bad situation, you can mitigate whatever damage that is there. Another small little aspect of that that the military taught me was discipline, and it taught me how to plan ahead. And
Yeah.
that's something that I think is severely lacking in our educational system and in business kind of in general, is really planning not only for the next day and next week, but the next month and years. Really detailed plans.
Yeah, that's man, spot on. And I have a real belief in that too. Before I got into the business world, I actually was a school teacher for 10 years, school administrator. So I've been in that classroom that you're talking about in preparation, preparing kids to go out. A lot different 20 years ago than it is today, obviously, with the way the world is and changes. And, what we were preparing kids at that time for college is totally different than it is today. But I like what you said there is to stay in the calmness. And I think that is such a valid point because when things go south or when things start to happen, if your process is broken, you have a tendency to kind of panic a little bit and start creating a sense of, oh crap, what do I do here? And that calmness can prevail because listen, you know it when you're uptight or you're, in a combat zone like that, people are watching you, right? And they're looking at you and how you handle the pressure, and that could be good or bad. So I'm sure the business world and owning their own company, people are kind of got their eye on you a little bit, huh?
Absolutely. And as the leader of the company, if I lose my mind, everyone else is going to lose theirs. They're going to say, oh, it's pandemonium, it's total chaos.
Yeah.
And, it was a relatively easy transition for me. I went from one environment that was life or death, high stress with a lot of variables that were out of my control, to an environment which was distressed real estate in the real estate market in 2008, 2009, but there was no life on the line, right? So for me, it was very easy to compartmentalize all of these decisions that I was making in the business world as what is the biggest downside, right? And the biggest downside was potentially a loss of money. And I thought, okay, I can recover from that, right? We're not losing life or limb. And there's a great kind of quote, which is if you've lost money, you've lost something. But if you've lost your character, you've lost everything. And so you know, I really think that that is a great way to reflect on, there's only a couple things in life that you can't get back, time being one of them. And then, of course, your reputation. And if you just consistently do what you say you're going to do, then I find, things tend to work out as long as you're saying cool things or good things.
Yeah, man, that's some nuggets right there. I love that. And it's true. We sometimes when we're in the world and we're working and we're providing for family or not family, and we get tied up, and it's all it can very quickly become about paycheck and become about what you're making
Yeah,
versus what your legacy is, right? And I think those things are two things. We get caught sometimes thinking, what I make is a example of the legacy that I'm going to live. And I think we get that wrong. I think our character and who we are as a human being is what our legacy is. People are not going to remember how much money you have, but they're going to remember whether you were nice or not, or you took care of somebody, or you were generous, or you worked with someone or helped. I heard this one time. I had I was opportunity to work with General Hal Moore, great general. And one of the things that he always said, and I love the way he said this, he always would say, when I went into combat or when he went in there, he was never going to leave a person behind, alive or dead. He was never going to leave someone behind. And I thought, all the accolades he got, all the things, that was the thing that was the most important to him. And that stems right to character, right? That was
Mhm.
his value because he knew those men were going to either come home alive or dead, but they were going to remember him as someone who never left somebody behind. And that's a character thing.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that is, my grandmother, my nana recently passed away, and we just had the funeral on Tuesday. She had
Sorry.
98. Yeah, no, she had 98 years. She
Awesome.
she won the game of life, my friend. She won.
Amen to that.
Right. And so I think about, when I'm 80, will this be important? You
Yeah.
know? And if the answer is no, I probably need to let it go, right? And that really, I've got young kids, that really helps me be a more patient father, a more patient husband, is putting things into a frame of reference that is removing yourself from the moment and, kind of metacognition, if you will, thinking about your thoughts and how you show up in the moment. And my framing is always, will 80-year-old Thomas be happy I did this? And if the answer is yes, I should do it. And if the answer is no, I should walk away. And that has really allowed me to focus on what I believe are the most important things in life and business and for me personally.
Yeah. I always like these podcasts because I try to come up with a kind of a script of what I want to ask the questions just based on the pre-discovery. And I always find it interesting that I never go by the script. Uh, and I think that's good because it becomes more about the conversation. And so, here it is again. This is going to go a little off the script, but I wanted to ask this question because something you said, and I've been really heavily thinking about this personally. This has been something where I'm sitting at is when I walked away from corporate America and started my own company and doing podcasts and working consulting and helping companies grow. And it's a very big passion for me. But what's funny is my family has realized the difference in me and my stress level and my demeanor, my time and my attention to details and all those things. And so, for those that are listening out there that may be sitting where I am, I'm just being raw and real with you. And I don't know if you've experienced that, but I can tell you for me, it's been a big shift in just me personally and what I value and how I even see the world being away from that, working 9 to 5 for someone else and constantly the stress of trying to accomplish something that you look back and go, no one's going to ever remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the irony, I think, of when, at least for me, when I take the perspective of 80-year-old Thomas, is I realize a lot of the things that I'm doing in the moment aren't important. And so I do less, but I accomplish more because I'm focusing on only those most important things that drive my either personal goals forward or they drive my business goals forward. And I'm laughing when you said a moment ago we've gone off script. There's an amazing philosopher, a modern philosopher, who is famously attributed with the quote, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face." Right? Mike
Yeah,
Tyson, of course, being our modern day philosopher. But
that's
I
it.
just think that that is such a fantastic quote because inevitably, 100% of the time, whatever the plan is, I make only one guarantee: it will not go according to plan. You know, that is my only guarantee in life.
And it's true, and I think that, we oftentimes get caught in the moment of having to do things a kind of a certain way, and so, I think about this in the business world a little bit is, my podcast is Process Over Pressure, and the reason being is that I think there's 2 in my personal experience and where I sit at, is I think you're either in 2 things. You're either in a process or you're in a pressure. And when I mean process, it's much bigger than like, today we're going to send this email, do this, do that. That are parts and pieces of a process. But even in life, if you just look at it in life, you either have a process or you're under pressure. You're either one of the two. So pressure could look a lot like being reactive because you don't have a general plan. Like, doesn't mean that we don't go off script or we change with a plan. But if you don't know how to think like that, or you don't have that processing the way you kind of process through things, you're constantly in pressure and you're being more reactive
Yes.
than active.
Yes, absolutely. Proactive is the state of being to be in. Being reactive, you've got higher cortisol levels, higher stress, and in chess, my kids are big into chess lately. And whoever is kind of controlling the board, it is said that they have the initiative and the other person is responding to their initiative. And I think so much about that is true in life, where if you are making moves and you are proactive, you are the one that is creating the environment by which everyone else is reacting to, which I think is just a fantastic way of being. And in my medical experience, we had to triage injured Marines and injured sailors. And there was a couple of buckets. One of those buckets were guys that no matter what happened, they weren't going to make it,
Yeah.
right? And that's an unfortunate bucket to have to put people in. Another bucket is, yeah, they're injured, but frankly, they're going to be okay. I don't really need to do much of anything. They're going to be okay. And then there's that kind of that middle bucket, if you will, which are people that if I take an intervention or I make an intervention, I give them a higher chance of survival. And that is where I had to spend my time as a combat medic, was with those emergencies. And I think in life, we don't triage well enough. We spend a lot of time on the things that frankly we don't need to spend any time on, right? Like they'll be fine no matter what. Or we spend time on things that are kind of a foregone conclusion. Like it doesn't matter what you do, you're not going to be able to help that. So triaging your way through life, like the old Eisenhower matrix, I think has really helped me, delete, delegate, or focus on those things that are most important.
And that's so true. Such a good part. So one thing I did want to ask you, and I think this kind of relates because look, everybody knows. I mean, we have a lot of vets that come out of service or come back or have served our country, and I'm very passionate about them. I think that we as a society could do more. These people are, I look at it and as people who have I didn't serve, wasn't I wasn't as brave enough to do it, is the way I look at it. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think people who serve our country are phenomenal human beings to do what they do. And so, a lot of vets come back and they have this mission or this they have a command and missions of what they do. And they come back and they try to come into the civilian world and business has a little bit of a different chain command and there's some challenges there. And so I was just curious, you being, a former vet, when you transitioned into the business world or into that, did it take some time to translate a little different? I mean, you got the skills and stuff they learned, but that civilian life to go into the business world doesn't exactly pair up together a lot of times.
It does. One thing that I've observed about the business world is much more so than the military. The military is a very strict chain of command. The military is very disciplined. If a sergeant or a captain or somebody gives a command or an order, that's typically carried out very rapidly, right? It's executed very quickly without much hesitation or questioning. Whereas in the business world, if you don't have the right people on your team, you get a lot of pushback, you get a lot of sandbagging. And I think some of that stems from A, having the wrong people on your team, but B, also people not being clear in what their role in the mission is. And that's a failure of leadership for everyone to understand their role in the mission at hand. In the military, even the guys that you would say are fixing trucks or the cooks preparing meals, they are equally important because without them, the mission will fail, you know.
So true. And so, you think about that in the business world. And when I have conversations with business owners, one of the things it's kind of been a relevant thing that happens. And it doesn't matter if you've got, one employee or you have 200 employees. I talk to a lot of variety of different business owners and I'm always generally, love to understand. And it almost seems like every time there's a couple things that always comes out. One being they're not very confident in the team that they have. I hear
Mhm.
that a lot. I hear that. And then the second is that they're spending a lot of time doing things that they don't really enjoy, that they would rather do because they can't find people to do it the way they would do it. Those are two things I hear a lot. And so being a business owner, I have my own theory. I mean, I have my own belief in it because I've been there and done that, and I get it. But what are your thoughts on that? I hear it all the time, so that's why I'm asking. I'm like, I'd love a perspective from somebody who's running a very successful company.
We all have natural talents and mental gifts, cognitive, physical gifts, whatever those talents are. And one of the things that we do here at our company is what is known as a personality assessment. It's a DISC profile, DISC profile. And what we do with that profile is we make sure that the person that we're hiring for the role is well suited. They have all the kind of natural predispositions for that role. For example, I'm more of a visionary. I'm more of a kind of big picture thinker and more of a leader. That just happens to be kind of my personality. There are people on team that are more detail oriented. They need facts, they need figures, they need all of the information before they take a step. For example, I might say, "Hey, let's climb to the top of that mountain. Who's ready?" Me. Great. I turn and I start going. Whereas other people on my team will say, "What time are we leaving? What do we need to bring with us? Who else is coming?" You know, those are the people that are fantastic accountants or operators or people that are getting specific tasks done related to what they're naturally predisposed to be good at. Whereas if you put me in front of a spreadsheet, I can do it. I know the math, I know the formulas, but it empties my gas tank very, very rapidly because I do not enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've done here is actually we put that personality assessment on everyone's door or desk. And so everyone can see like the top three do's and the top three don'ts. For me, one of the top do's is be very concise and to the point. One of the top don'ts, ramble. Like I got stuff to do. If you've got a question for me, get right to it. Don't talk about the weather. Don't talk about your kid. Get right to it. I got stuff to do. And
Yeah.
so what we have found a tremendous amount of success in the company is making sure that people are aligned with their own kind of natural genetic or environmental, whatever it was, that upbringing, that predisposition for their role. And we've even had fantastic people that weren't in the right role and we move them to a different role. And then next thing you know, they bloom. They're doing absolutely fantastic in that new role.
Man, uh, you're giving me goosebumps over here as I love it. I think about this when I'm a big, I love DISC. I think assessments are so big. I think they're what's funny though is that when I'm consulting people, I always ask, "Have you ever done a personality test?" This is one of the first questions I always ask.
Okay.
You'd be shocked at how many don't, and then the ones that say, "Oh yeah, we've done those," and I'm like, "Okay, well, what did they tell you?"
Yep.
It's somewhere because they do them because it's the thing to do, right? It's the let's do that, but they don't know how to read it or they don't know how to incorporate it into their business. And I like what you're doing because you're not only you do that, but you're using that information, which is very, 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 very good information, and putting your people in a position to win, which in long term is going to make them productivity way more. They're going to be happier in their job and your company as a whole is going to thrive and it's going to give you a better result of what, of action plan, even down to the coaching that you do. Everybody has to be coached differently. Like they can't all be coached the same. They're all not in the same bucket. You gotta coach them differently. So that's really good to hear. Like I think that's an area that I think a lot of business owners struggle in. Uh, because they do them because everybody said they need to do one, but they don't really look at them and understand. Well, how do I turn this into the business world? And that's where,
Yep. Yep. No, absolutely. And knowledge is useless unless it's embodied. Unless you embody and do something with that knowledge, it is completely useless. And what we did is we actually recruited a psychologist to sit on our board who is very familiar with those disc profiles. And so after one of our people do a disc profile, they sit with this psychologist, this board certified psychologist, and they go through their disc profile. And, these things aren't 100% accurate, but they're close. They're close. And then after that person has sat with that psychologist then sits with me and other senior leadership at the company. And we talk about how we as the leaders should be interacting with that person. And, this kind of gets down to love languages, words of
yeah,
affirmation. Some people will absolutely glow and thrive if you give them an attaboy, a verbal attaboy in front of the whole group.
Yeah.
Other people like little gifts. Other people like quality time, right? Or physical touch. We don't do a lot of physical touch, but you do what you can. And what I was just kind of getting back to was it's so important that you speak to your audience. And, whether that's an entire company or an individual or a team, they all have their own culture, they all have their own flair and flavor. And it is so important as the person kind of leading that company, leading that ship, if you will, that you're speaking to the audience in a way that they can hear it and then embody that information so that it becomes useful to them.
Yeah. Totally agree. Yeah, that's really, really good. So we've been talking here a little while, but I want to make sure I would be remiss if I didn't hit on your company and kind of
Yeah.
what you Lucrum's, company you're running today. And one of the things I thought was interesting is, you know, you you're very bright, very smart guy. I could tell when I met with you, I was like,
Thank you.
yeah, the guys get it. But what I thought the thing that I was like kind of attracted me is thinking, man, you don't just talk about your business, you actually put your own capital into it. Like you put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. Just say it frank. So
Here we
what?
we do the old,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, let's be honest. So you're not like a lot of people. Like, I mean, there are people that have done it, but you know, I just curious you when you did that. Like, tell me a little bit about the company and where you are and the reason why you structured that way and what because I think it's something I would have to imagine is very passionate to you based on your willingness to say, okay, I'm going to step up first.
I will answer the question, I'll do it in a roundabout way, if you wanna stick with me here.
Yeah,
So,
you're the guest. You can do what you want to.
yeah, I appreciate that. Well, it's your show, so, um, you know, humans have evolved over the last several thousand years from relatively small tribes to these kind of, large multi-million dollar or multi-million or even billion person countries or cities or whatever those are. When you were in a small tribe, you really had to look out for one another and you had to do what was in the best interest for the collective group, right? And we've gotten away from that a little bit. I think a lot of our systems, a lot of our institutions are broken because of the lack of intimacy and the lack of really knowing the people that you serve. And to kind of bring this home, when I was in the military, again, my job was to keep my Marines alive, keep them safe, bring them home, right? Preferably alive. And what happened was I got used to risking my own life to protect and serve my Marines.
Mm.
Now, I'll share a quick experience. When I was in the military at the end of my career, I had been reading the Kiyosaki Rich Dad Poor Dad, Think and Grow Rich, Millionaire Mind, all of these books from a young age. Because growing up, I had been told, no, when I asked for something, and they didn't say, no, I'm your parents, that's enough. They said, no, we don't have the money. And so in my mind, I associated having money with freedom. And the same is true today.
Yeah.
And so I decided to invest in the stock market. Now, I was in the military and my life was, at risk from time to time. So my risk profile was pretty high. And so I borrowed money from some banks. I opened a margin account, not a cash account, and I bought stock options. And in about 6 weeks, I made 150 grand. It was great. That was the worst possible thing that could have happened to me because I thought I was a genius. I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. And then when I was getting out of the military in late 2008, the stock market crashes and I literally lost all of my money. I owed the brokerage firm and I owed the banks. And I realized that was because of misaligned interests or misaligned motivation. The CEOs of some of those companies that failed, Bear Stearns, Lehman, you name it, they said, hey, listen, the company's bankrupt, but I will stick around and so will the executive team. We'll collect our $20 million severance package and we'll wind down this company through bankruptcy. Meanwhile, the shareholders got stuck holding an empty bag, right, of IOUs. And I thought, there's something fundamentally wrong with our investment system where the investors, the people taking all of the risks, are not the ones who are being financially rewarded and protected by the people that they have trusted with their money. So
Yeah.
what I decided to do when I started my company is I have invested millions of dollars. My executive team, my board of advisors have all invested millions of dollars in the company. And what we did to totally align ourselves with our investor base is we subordinated our interest to all of our investors so that if there are any ever losses or impairments to value, we absorb those losses before our investors do. And the same is true on the reward side. Whenever it comes time for a distribution, our investors get paid first. And only after they've been paid in full do we get our distributions. We built that into the very structure of our company and of our investment products. Now, when you do that structurally, what happens is you make different decisions, knowing it's my money on the line. I'm the one risking first money. You know, we make better decisions that I think are in the client's best interests. We're not willing to take as much risk. And we also do certain things to ensure transparency and accountability because we know that our investors demand that.
Yeah. Wow. That's so impressive and very rare, honestly, very rare. People like that's not how the system works. So
We're hoping to change the industry. We're hoping to be leaders in the space and get more financial executives to adopt that philosophy.
yeah, I think, you know, kind of going back but this to what you just said and going back to that that tribal reference, right? You literally are inserting that tribal belief back into your own company. You're going to take care of your people first, and that's kind of what you that's what you've done. That's what you are. I mean, it's what you are doing. And so that's a scary thing too, because now you're right. Your decisions are going to be way different when it's your own money, right?
The irony was I actually thought my team would take more risk because they'd say, hey, well, listen, we can afford to take more risk because we're acting as a buffer to protect our investors, right? So I thought they might be willing to chase more deals and chase higher yields to kind of go after better returns. But the opposite happened. My team actually became more conservative in their underwriting because at the end of the day, they realized it was their money that was on the line first. And thankfully, we've had a fantastic track record. We've made all of our distributions on time every single month. Our investors have never had any impairment to their capital, and we've got a great track record in history of success.
Yeah, I think the business model that you just walked us through is definitely different. It's disruptive, but I like that. I think that we often, again, kind of relating this back to the process and kind of what we're talking about. You know, there we can always keep doing the same way everybody else does it, and a lot of people will say, well, this works, so let's just repeat the cycle because it works. Like it's been proven, right? It's been done. But I think real leaders and real visionaries and entrepreneurs are finding ways to disrupt that system to create their own path. And what I like, what I'm hearing is that you've done that and you're having success with it. And so, how many people now will follow and say, "Well, that's the new process"? Will be interested to see.
If we look back over the last several thousand years, technology evolved very slow, very, very slowly. And you and I, we were born really at the end of the analog age.
Oh yeah,
We are now going into the digital age in a big way. And radical change is happening faster now than ever before in human history, faster than most people can perceive or comprehend. AI is going to rapidly change our world, advances in material sciences and nanotechnology. The list goes on, medical advances. And I think that one of the approaches you have to have as a leader in life is you have to encourage, adopt, and lean into change and disruption. Because if you do not, you will absolutely become extinct like the dinosaurs because there are other leaders that are doing that. And Every industry across the board is going to undergo such a radical transformation in this next decade. Even by the end of this decade, I'm telling you, 5 years from now, things will be barely recognizable.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I mean, I'm part of what why I walked away from corporate America and started my own company was to be a disruptor. I mean, I do yes, I do consulting, which is which is a lot of people do consulting. My approach is totally different. But the thing about, you mentioned like the AI automation is something that I've done a lot of, and honestly, I always tell people because again, everybody's talking about AI, right? Everybody's out there like talking about
Yep,
technology and the advancement
yep.
of technology, and it goes way beyond AI. There's so much more. I mean, it's just the platforms that are out there today are totally different than they were during our time. But I always tell people when they ask the question, because a lot of people get very scared about, I just use AI for example. They get very scared about it, like, I don't know, and all this. And I tell people all the time, it says AI is going to be like the website was 25 years ago. When it first came out, everybody was like, I'm not putting that, I'm not putting website and internet. I'm not doing all that. And, we had the old dial up where it went through a whole kind, we went through this whole variation, right? And now you look at companies today and you really can't survive if you don't even have a simple website. Like
Yeah,
that's, yeah. So I tell people, think of it like AI like that. What we see today is great. 20 years from now, if you're not using it, you're going to be so far behind and lost, and it's going to be so advanced that it's growing so fast.
truly. I saw a stat. There's a famous MIT graduate and a futurist technologist, a guy named Ray Kurzweil. Brilliant man, and he's been incredibly accurate on his predictions. And I think, and I might get these dates slightly wrong, but the overall theme is accurate. And it's something like by the year 2030, we will have a supercomputer that has the computing power of one human brain. And by the year 2040, we will have a supercomputer that has the computing power of the entire human race. I think about what that will mean from a technology, medicine, what that will mean from a cultural standpoint. And technology is awesome until it becomes a substitute for in person interactions. Because at the end of the day, what we're noticing is it's very challenging on a phone call to get someone or on a video meeting like this to get someone to invest $1 million or even more in a project. But if you sit down in person and you get to know someone, that really helps move the conversation forward in a big way. And so while there are certain aspects of our society that will be radically disrupted, there's also certain aspects that I think will remain timeless. And that is, being in person, being face to face, and making those connections. Because at the end of the day, business is still relational. It is absolutely still relational.
Totally agree, and I am not an advocate for replacing people. That's not a lot of people say, "Oh, you do AI, you're in for replacing people." I do not believe in that. I would tell you that I evaluate, and this is what my belief on the entire where AI is, and I'll tell you, I think you have to do as a business owner, and I tell clients this as a business owner, you have just like you do an evaluation of your people and put them just like we talked about disc, and you put them in the right place. You have to treat AI like an employee.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you do that, there's a place in the system for it. You're not looking at it as a replacement, but how does it fit into my system as an employee? Always think of it as an employee. If you do that, then your mindset around it changes because now you're looking at it as an individual that works for you because that's really what it does. And rather than it being a replacement, it's more of how can we operate in this so that our process is giving us because it's all about listen, everything we do today is about time. It's all about time because there's only so much time. If we're spending, 20 hours on the telephone, we're probably not being very productive because we're distracted. And so you have to think about it. That's why you hire somebody, right? When you go to hire your first employee, it's not because you said, oh, well, we've made enough money. We're just going to hire somebody because we need somebody sitting over in a corner. No, you're trying to get time. So you got to think about AI the same way. When I hire, it's an employee. It's giving me time. What time is he going to give me? What is he going to do that I'm not good at? That's the way you have to look at it.
I think that's a fantastic approach. As we get closer to agentic AI in a lot of areas, you need to view each one of those agents as an employee, and are they fulfilling the mission that we have programmed them to fulfill? Because you will have multiple agents, customer service agent, a technician agent that is routing specific maintenance requests, whatever those different things are across your company, and viewing each AI use case as an employee, I think is a fantastic approach. I haven't had that approach, and I'll definitely sit with that for a little while.
Yeah, maybe it's a nugget I give you, but I've been really doing a little bit of kind of my own research on this and just the topic, and because I'm always wanting to, I think when you look at it and you kind of start thinking about how it fits, sometimes we get way big and we start thinking about stuff like in a huge view, and I like to think of it in the granular, like where we are, and that's what I kept coming back to is that um, we gotta evaluate this differently because every company's different, right? Every company has different problems. The more money you make, the more your scale, your problems are totally different than someone who's brand new starting out. I mean, when you're starting out, you're just trying to get business. You're just trying to make sales. You're just trying to grow. You're in grow mode. And so you gotta think about that and where you are as a company. So one thing we're getting close to time to wrap up, but you've been very generous with your time, and so I'm a very stickler on to
Yeah,
make sure I keep your time. But what is it that if we asked the question, like you've got an awesome resume, you got it, but if there's one thing that we was like not going to find on your LinkedIn bio that you're probably really proud of, or something that means something to you, what would that be?
that is a fantastic question. Let me sit with that for just a few seconds.
And I'll as you're sitting there processing, I keep thinking along, and I just think sometimes we get to know the person, but I always like to ask what will we not find about you that you
Yeah, I such a good question. I could rattle off some of the accolades and some of the awards and some of the big adventures, but I I think I'm going to sit with, I saw, as I mentioned, I was at a funeral, and I had a chance to see gravestones, and I was walking through cemetery, and you can see some of the things that they list on the gravestone. You know, they don't list your award, rookie of the year. They don't list, oh, he made $10 million in his lifetime or a billion. They don't list any of that stuff. The things that they list are truly the most important things to me: father, husband, son, community member, contributed in meaningful ways. And so, I would say in my heart, I'm not perfect, but in my heart, I generally try and do good everywhere that I can. I participated in the military in a lot of suffering. And September 11th happened, and we were, I think, lied to. The American public was lied to by Dick Cheney and a bunch of other people to get us to invade Iraq. And here we are back in the Middle East again. Um, and so, I think I participated in a lot of human suffering, and I want to spend the rest of my life contributing to a world that is more abundant for more people. I think that we have unlimited resources on this planet, truly, from our perspective, unlimited resources. Every person can have all the food they want. Every person can, have a safe place to live and call home, education, medical access, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, it's all about allocating those resources better so that we can all be living a more abundant life.
as solid go. Couldn't agree with you. We often sometimes in life get caught up in our own personal square. I call it our personal square, and we don't really stop to think about the people outside of that square. And you're right. I mean, this is we're a country that is hurting. It really is. I mean, there's so much divisiveness, this stuff out there. I'm like you. I think it's good sometimes just to stop and say, you know, what can I do today that may help somebody? Like, and I mean, just the simplest things. I was the other day. I was at a store, and I'm like you. There was this little old lady, and I just said hello. I didn't do anything. I didn't give her anything, and she lit up. And, just having a conversation with somebody that actually stopped and I like noticed her. I got back in my truck and I'm sitting there going, like, I didn't do anything. I just said hello and just talked to her. But this lady went on and went on. And, I found myself 20 minutes listening to her. And I'm like, you know, that was probably all she needed today to make her feel good.
Absolutely.
It was 20 minutes of my time. And no, hey, don't get me wrong. I've gone days where I'm like, I don't want to talk to somebody and I ignore them and keep walking. So I'm guilty of that. Hey, look, I'm not perfect. But I think that's the thing that we need to do is stop and remember that we're not the only people in the world. There's other people. And if we can give a little generosity or a little hello or a thank you, thank you goes a long way. We should do it.
Absolutely. Human connection at the end of the day is, I think, one of the most beautiful drivers of happiness, of business, of so many aspects of our civilization, and that is connection. And I think that if we were all a lot more connected to one another, we would see a lot of conflict go down, and we would see actually a lot of productivity and prosperity go way up
Yeah.
because of human connection.
Hey, there's no doubt about it. When everyone's feeling good, it's better. Just the
Absolutely. Absolutely.
well, Thomas, again, as we wrap this show up, if someone was trying to get in touch with you or look up your company, could you share with them how they would do that?
Yeah. We've got a website like we talked about, the yellow pages. You and I are old enough to remember the yellow pages. Those
Yeah.
things are, you know, kind of ways of the past. And so our website is simple, www.lucrom, Lucrom.com. It's a play on the Latin word like lucrative investment. So lucrum is that kind of base word, which means profit, gain, advantage, wealth, abundance. And so they can go to the website, they can find our contact information, they can find my information to the team and give us a call and reach out, and we can talk about how we can, help them invest or how we can help them accomplish their financial goals.
Well, thank you very much. Like I said, guys, if you're out there and you want to find somebody different, that you're tired of investing with the same old way and you're looking for someone who really wants to partner with you, Thomas is your guy. You should definitely reach out to him. I think you'll enjoy your conversation and probably maybe a little breath of fresh air. It's doing it some way a little different than a lot of people. So again, thank you again for coming on the show. It's been a great conversation. And thank you for your service and your time you've given this country. Really means a lot to me as a person who lives here. So I just want to thank you for that. And thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for paying taxes so that I had a salary when I was in the military. It's good.